Thank you all for coming. The topic today for the panel is fostering diversity and inclusion in an open source world. And this is under the open source community track, if you will, of OpenStack. My name is Nithya Ruff, and I'm the Senior Director of Open Source Practice at Comcast. We are a user of OpenStack, supporter of OpenStack, a lot of contributors to OpenStack. It's one of my favorite places to come visit, and I'm glad to be here, especially on a glorious day like today, right? And so, especially today, I am very grateful that so many of you have joined us. I just want to also give a quick plug. Right after this session, the movie or the documentary Chasing Grace will be screened on the second floor in the Lightning Theater at 4:15? 4:10. So Jennifer Clore will be hosting it, and it's a very compelling, powerful documentary on women in tech and diversity in general. So I would highly recommend that you guys run from here and climb up to the second floor and see the movie. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? And I will also turn to my panel to introduce themselves. But before I do that, the topic is, why do we need to care about inclusion, right? Inclusion is an important topic. And why is it so important, particularly in open source, particularly in tech? And we'll discuss a lot of that. And then I would love to hear from each of the panelists. Each of these folks have been selected because they're doing some amazing leading edge work to change the narrative, to change the culture, if you will, to change some of the tools, the processes that are being used to make tech more inclusive. And we'll also try to give you some takeaways, some simple things you can do, or a book you can read, or an article you can read to improve the culture in your communities. So why is tech important, and why is inclusion very important? At lunch, Jennifer and I were talking about the fact that what digital transformation is doing is it's redoing and changing and remaking the world. If you will, it's World 2.0. It's recreating the world, right, as we know it. The way we procure things, the way we hail cars and taxis, the way we consume food, the way we go to restaurants, and everything about our lives is changing. So shouldn't the people that make this digital world also be diverse? So that we can reflect the diversity of the world around us. That's one of the most compelling reasons for me as to why we need to include people of all types to reflect the world that we live in. The second thing is, which is connected to point one, is this tremendous amount of bias that we all can introduce into algorithms, into the way we create systems, if we do not have a diverse set of eyes and a diverse set of developers and technologists working on the technology. And third, when I talk to developers in my company and other companies and in projects, they say, I want to be in a world that appreciates me, that values me, that includes me, that welcomes me. And so if you want an engaging project, you need to be an inclusive project. Culture of innovation is tied to having a diverse group of people. It broadens the recruitment pool for companies. It embraces the fact that we are a global organization, a global community in OpenStack and in tech in general. And last but not the least, we cannot sustain open source if we do not have new people coming into open source. A lot of us, I've been in open source for quite a few years, are becoming gray-haired, graybeards, or whatever you call them, and we need an influx of young people. We need an influx of global people. We need an influx of people into tech. So with that, setting the stage, I want to kind of go over to my panel and ask them to introduce themselves. Brian, if you could please start and tell us what you do and also your organization and why this topic is so important to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't know if I should take it personally when she mentioned the gray beard a second ago, but I knew I should have got a little bit of color. My name is Brian Johnson. First of all, I'd like to thank you very much for inviting me, but also welcome you to my beautiful city of Vancouver. I've been in Vancouver for about 16 years, originally from Toronto. I'm the founder of a nonprofit organization called Black Boys Code. And what we do, we introduce young black boys to computer science. Boys from 8 to 17 years old, but somehow we seem to have gravitate to boys 8 to 12. We do this, we accomplish this through one-time exposure workshops. We've got after school and hackathons. We have also got a summer program that we'll be introducing next year. We have across Canada now. We started here in Vancouver. As a matter of fact, we started on the desk of Starbucks, not too far from where I live, about 2.5 years ago. I had no idea what I was getting into, my background, and be totally transparent. I'm not a technologist. I've worked as a project manager. I've worked around some very, very smart people, some brilliant people, but myself, I'm not a technologist. But after I left my last position, I looked around and I noticed that as you guys are all aware, that the future is in technology. And I noticed that not too many people of color was in technology, and that's how Black Boys Code was first started. Again, as I said, had I known what I was getting in for, maybe I would just got back to work and started, continue on with my career. But so far, it's been absolutely fantastic. I've met some incredibly interesting people. Before I started Black Boys Code, I was not a kids person. I was the guy at work when, the new moms came and the kids came, and I was like in my office kind of hiding because, I'm just not. But now working with the kids, and I'll make this really fast. The best thing about what I do is when the kids graduate from the program, they all have to come up on stage and they get their certificates. And I've got pictures, just the kids, the look on their face, the smiles on their faces. To me, that makes it all worthwhile. So a little bit about myself.
Joseph,
Hi.
welcome.
Thank you. I'm Joseph Santaville. I work with Adobe Systems. I'm in the Ad Cloud division, and I run a cloud platform management team. I've been, active over 25 years. Well, 25 years I've been in the industry. Probably like the last really 15 years, I started really recognizing, that there was some change really happening in the Valley in regards to, the representation of like women, African Americans, and Latins, where, I really started feeling like I needed to really start stepping up and like trying to address and have this dialogue. And it was a journey for me as well, to kind of get there. So, I try to make it a real key point to, like at Adobe, I stay active in a lot of the affinity groups, make sure I'm participating. But I've also gotten to a point where I just feel like the situation, and I speak specifically for where I'm at in the Silicon Valley, where I feel like it's really critical now. Like it's great we're having these conversations, and I'm really happy that I look out and I see everybody here listening and very interested in this subject. But I've gotten really where I'm like, okay, enough for me talking about it. I got to get actionable. So I've been really focusing on connecting with like mentors and mentees, or mentoring students that are coming out of boot camps, helping them so that they can find their place. A lot of it is just come with me, spend the day with me, watch what I'm doing. I want to show you. I want to take away the magic behind what may seem so difficult for you to achieve. And you can have this. You can, if you really want to work towards it. So finding some great success. It's a lot of work, but with more allies coming along, I know we can make change and actually improve these numbers from the real low numbers where they're at.
That's so powerful. Thank you. Amy, I know you do a tremendous amount of work with the OpenStack Foundation in particular, but introduce yourself, please.
My name is Amy Marish. I'm a course author at Linux Academy, and I'm the chair of the diversity working group here at the OpenStack community. I also lead the Women of OpenStack. I'm a member of the user committee. So I'm kind of proof that you can come into our community and be whoever you want to be. We're also doing the mentoring program. We had a great speed mentoring session yesterday. We are excited that we've made some decisions on our long-term mentoring program, and we'll be announcing those and getting that out soon. But it's very important to bring people in, talk with them, and mentor them. Today we had 35 people I counted at the Git and Garrett Lunch and Learn, which was something that came out of our first diversity working group survey, that people said they had issues with the tools, and it was not what we were expecting. So it's important to realize that our community is multinational all over the world. So we have issues that maybe some other groups don't have, such as time zones, language. So the more we can do to include people that are somewhere else, it's invaluable.
Jennifer.
Does my mic work? Yeah. I'm Jennifer Clower. I'm the creator and executive producer of the Chasing Grace Project, which is a documentary series about women in tech. We screened and premiered our first episode about a month and a half ago. We're going to screen it, as Nithya mentioned, today. It's not available online yet because we're in talks with distributors, so this is one of your only opportunities to see it. So please come see it. I've been a woman in tech about 17 years. I spent 12 of those years at the Linux Foundation. I was on the founding team there. So I left there just a couple years ago and started a couple companies. One is a PR consulting business. I'm a PR gal by day, studied journalism and a storyteller. And then I also started with a partner, Wicked Flix Productions, which is the production company producing Chasing Grace. And generally, I believe that story can change culture. And culture in tech is cited as the #1 reason why there are fewer women in tech than ever before. If you don't know that stat, it's a hard one to digest, but it's the truth according to NCWIT. So I'm hoping that the stories that we tell can raise awareness and start to change culture. I've got a lot of evidence. Nithya recently saw me do a keynote about how story changes culture. I'll save that for another day, but that's my take and why I'm here.
No, terrific. And all of you point out the importance in all of our lives as to why we got into tech, right? For me, it was my dad who introduced me to tech, and for other kids, it's a teacher. And Joseph, as you said, if kids don't have access to teachers or parents or role models around them that are in tech, then it's how wonderful is it to find mentors like you who can introduce them and say, this is a magical world, and you can do it too. And how to get involved in tech. So it's the role of mentors or someone showing you the way is such an important thing. But what I love about all of your stories is there are successes that you've achieved, and you're doing something tangible and concrete about, including people, making it easy to include people. So very quickly, what is the organization that you founded do? What are some of the successes that you feel very proud of in this organization?
Well, it's interesting. After one of our workshops, we've always asked the parents to post on Twitter the reaction of their kids and so on. And then we also have surveys that we survey the parents after some of the kids take a Black Boys Code workshop. And one of the parents posted on Twitter that she came down one night, and here's this kid on his own after he's taken a Black Boys Code workshop, coding on his own. He actually went out. We gave them access to the projects they work on, and he was actually downstairs at 11:30 working on one of the projects, and she was so proud because and that's basically what we try to do at Black Boys Code. We try to give the kids that spark to get them interested in technology. Many people ask me what languages we use and so on and so forth, but for me, the language is academic. We always start with scratch, but it's just to get those kids so interested in coding that they can forget about LeBron James for a second or two and just get into just coding, and that's one of the successes we've had. The other successes that I'm quite proud of is when we first started, we would be contacting the different school boards. And I don't know if the last time you guys looked for a job or whatever, but you dial the number and you have the gatekeepers. Who are you guys with again? So a year later, now I've got the Toronto School Board, principals from the Toronto School Board, which is the largest school board in Canada, contacting me. Peel Region School Board, the second largest school board, is contacting Black Boys Code now. So that's one of the successes we feel, that we're doing something right for these large school boards to be contacting us.
That's remarkable. They see a need, and they're finally getting the idea of how to do it. And perhaps using a model or working with you to get it done.
Well, one of the things we do as well in our workshops is the kids really appreciate the role models that they don't normally see. One of the challenges, as you can see around the conference here today, is there's not too many black males, people of my color, in the room. So when we have accomplished black males who may own computer companies and so on in Toronto and in Vancouver, the kids see this. We have these individuals come in and speak to the boys. Sometimes we teach them code. Sometimes we just have a round table saying, well, okay, well, I came from this particular neighborhood. I went to this elementary school, high school, university, and so on. That's something that the boys are connecting with. And hopefully, because again, we only work with boys 8 to 12 years old, but hopefully as they go through their educational journey, they'll remember some of these conversations and then move on to university or post-secondary education.
Joseph, I know you've had many successes mentoring people, and you told us a really wonderful story, and you shared a link with us. We'd love to hear more about some of your successes.
Sure. I think, I did share that one. And I also had another one I didn't share where it was actually a young woman engineer in our organization who, I've spent time with over the last couple of years. She definitely had endured a lot of some toxic culture that, she should not have to endure. And just helping to shape and change that was one thing. But about a year ago, we both I invited her to go to the Women Who Code event at Twitter. It's on a Saturday. And I was like, you really should go. It should be a really great experience. And so we went off, spent the day, had great conversations. And about halfway through the day, I was just like, I could tell she kind of had her training wheels about feeling confident. And so we come to this year here in April. And I remembered, I'm like, wow, the Women Who Code event's coming up again. I knew I couldn't attend, but I asked her, I was like, why don't you should maybe think about sponsoring the event. And she was like, are you sure? I was just planning to go. And I'm like, no, you should do something. Let's do something more. So just showing her how to go about getting the sponsors, getting stakeholders to come in. And we did it really last minute as well. So we had to really go around asking internally for sponsors. I was getting kind of concerned because I'm like, well, I hope I didn't set her up to kind of fail here and not be able to deliver something. But amazingly, everything really pulled together. She ended up coordinating an event. Adobe became a sponsor for this. It exceeded my expectations. And now she's kind of really full-blown going in well, what can I do next? She wants to organize some other events. And just to kind of see that, it was just a little nudge and a push. And, sometimes some people just need the confidence to know that they can accomplish it and to see it. I was really inspired just to kind of see, her really take the reins. And now she's establishing herself in our business unit as one of the leaders. And just to see her growth has been just a tremendous reward for me. I'm really happy, and I'm looking to see I know she's going to eventually probably become C-level because she just has that talent.
It just needed that spark to kind of light that fire and to move forward. Yeah, that's fantastic. I was on a train, the Bay Area Rapid Transport. For many of you who know from the San Francisco Bay Area, and I was overhearing a conversation between two young people. This young woman, a Latina, she was telling this young man, stay in school, persist, don't drop out. There'll be lots of distractions, but you should stay and you finish. And here's my card, contact me when you finish. And I will, help you, find a job. And this guy was almost in tears. He said, there's no one usually takes the time to talk to me and tell me what to do. And the fact that you're successful, you're about my age, and the fact that you're willing to help me when I graduate, and you're telling me some, really strong truths. She said it 4 times. Stay in school. You're going to get distracted, but don't get distracted. Was powerful. So the mentors, the people who kind of give you a nudge, push, and help you see that there is a future and to persist is so important, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Amy, there are so many things that OpenStack does so well from an inclusion perspective and onboarding. Can you give us some successes and some examples, please?
Yeah, I've got one from Barcelona. I was on the travel support there, and we did the picture, so everyone kind of knew who else was on travel support. And the day after I did the Get and Garrett, one of the guys who was on travel support with me there was at the same hotel, and he's like, do you mind if I join you for breakfast? I'm like, sure, no problem. I got to eat because I have another meeting to go to, but if you don't mind me eating, I'll talk to you all you want. And it ended up he was trying to put on a meetup in South Africa. Wow. So, we just discussed, community and how to get involved and stuff. And he's like, can I borrow your materials from the session yesterday? I'm like, oh, sure, here's the link, go enjoy yourself. Well, about 2 months later, I got an email back from him, thanking me so much for taking the time. and that he had presented this stuff and just had such a great reception and just thanking me. And it's like, it was maybe a 15-minute conversation that changed not one life, but multiple lives of however many people were in attendance. And that's what we tend to do. We're not just in OpenStack. Diversity is not just male, female. It's national. And that's something, you know, we're involved with the Chaos Project, which is doing metrics in diversity and inclusion. And, you know, when I went to the first initial meetings of Chaos, you know, their version of diversity was where the project was in its life cycle. And I'm like, but what else are we considering diversity? Because that's not what I consider diversity. And it's great when I go to some of the diversity and inclusion meetings and, you know, they're trying to get data from all over the place so they can see where we are as a community in open source. You know, are we reaching everyone we should be?
And you bring up such an important point that the health of a project, that health of open source is not just measured by the maturity of the project or number of pull requests or number of downloads, etc. It's really measured by the vibrancy of the community involved and the diversity of the community involved. How inclusive is that community, right? How does it do they make it easy for people to enter the community through getting started guides? And I know you guys do a lot of work in the contribution guide work on OpenStack. The other piece that you said, which I think Nicole and you did a fantastic job of the mentoring lunch the other day, is all it takes is you get a free lunch, you guys, if you become a mentor. I got a nice, wonderful free lunch. I got a fantastic, item, which is very Vancouver. And we did 3 or 4 rounds of mentoring, 10 minutes each. And it was delightful, right? You have got to eat lunch anyway. Like she had to eat breakfast the other day. And you got to touch lives. You got to share your story. You got to ignite someone's, mind about what they could do and what they could become. So just take time to do it. And that's the point that Nicole's panel also was making yesterday, that you don't need to be afraid to be a mentor, because you can do it in 10-minute segments, or you can do it through a breakfast or lunch or anything. Jennifer, you really changed the narrative around diversity. Why is storytelling so important? What successes have you seen from the storytelling you've been doing?
Well, as I mentioned, I believe that story changes culture. There's lots of milestones in history as far back as the impact of Homer's work on the Greek army and how they actually fought battle as a result of the stories that they read, all the way to more recent works like Middlesex, which changed the narrative on transgender in 2002. There's like science evidence and lots of stuff I could quote about the impact of story on culture. And again, culture being cited as the #1 reason why there are fewer women in tech than ever before. But I have an anecdote, like everyone else here, a little story I can share that was really interesting. Some of the most enthusiastic responses we've gotten to the project is from young women, which is really encouraging because we need young women to decide to join us in tech. But we screened the first episode in Portland. It's about the pay gap. You'll see it if you attend the screening. And we started there because that's a tangible indicator of progress, right? Are women making as much money as men? I don't want to give away too much about the episode, but a young woman attended that screening from Bend, Oregon. The screening was in Portland. She traveled from Bend. Actually, she lives in a small community outside of Bend, Sisters, Oregon. It's where the International Quilt Show is, if anybody doesn't know what Sisters is. Anyways, and she's 17. She's a senior in high school. She's planning to pursue a computer science education degree, but she's worked in a yogurt shop in that small town for a couple years. She found out after she'd attended the screening that a boy her age, also working at the yogurt shop, was making $1 more an hour than her. And she went home and had a conversation with her mom, who I know, who brought her to the premiere. And they had a conversation about what she should do about this. And she said, you know what? It's really scary, but I'm going to talk to my boss because I went and saw that screening premiere about the pay gap. And those women had so much courage. And she's 17 years old at a yogurt shop in Sisters, Oregon. And she went and she talked to her boss about the disparity, and he gave her the $1 raise. She confronted her boss. So, that's one story, but wow, that gives me goosebumps. So, hopefully that carries through and she has that resolve as she pursues her computer science degree, because the women I talk to who have spent time in those programs, it's tough for a lot of reasons. It's a tough degree, right? But it's also tough because you're a minority and you're often the only woman in the room. So.
Totally. And we often talk about the fact that a lot of women get turned away from tech or turned off from tech because the image that they see is often, the Mark Zuckerberg type of image, right? In a hoodie and sitting in a lonely spot coding. But they don't realize that it could be many different things. You could do tech in fashion. You could do tech in various areas, in food, in automotive, etc., and that it could be an intersection.
The Mark Zuckerberg story is why it's one of the reasons the culture is what it is today. It's this idea around the $1 billion unicorn and the super genius, and he's young and he's white and he wears a hoodie, right? And that's been the story for the last 10 years. And so I just want to say that I am really encouraged because I think the narrative is starting to change. We are pivoting as an industry. It's really early and it's a marathon, not a sprint. But I think the culture is starting to change, and stories, I hope, like the Chasing Grace Project and the other stories you're hearing will have that impact. The icon of tech will become something different, and hopefully not just one person.
So I know you've got to run to the screening, so I want to ask you one last question. What can the audience do in a very tangible way every day to improve the culture of tech?
Most of you probably work with women, but there's probably only one or two in your office or on your team. If you work in tech, that's generally the way it goes. Ask her questions, invite her to participate, show her that she's valuable. Every woman I talked to was so flattered that I asked them to tell me their story, and they didn't think they had a story. And they all have a story, right? We all of us, men and women from everywhere, have a story. So just engage if you're a male ally. Support the women on your team. Really quick anecdote, and then I'll leave. One of the women in the episode actually does confront her boss about being paid less, and she told me the story, and I said, before you tell the story on camera about your current employer, you're going to want to make sure that you're okay with that. You may get pushed out. You may become a target. She went into her office the next day, told her boss, I'm going to tell this story, and I want your support. He gave her his support, and he attended the screening premiere with her. That is an example of a male ally.
Yes, powerful. Thank you. Yes. It's a powerful movie, and it gives me hope. It gives me energy to watch the stories of women prevailing. Amy, second floor Lightning Theater, sponsored by Sousa.
Go left, go through the marketplace and up the escalators. Okay.
Yep.
Not that I haven't walked around here a lot.
Before we turn to the audience, one last thing. Amy, any advice for the audience, or one thing that they can do, or one article they can read to become more inclusive or to help the narrative?
I mean, I've mainly been the only female in most positions. And even when I was a manager, I was always inclusive of, the resume shouldn't be whose name is on it. It should be what the resume contains. And I was lucky with my development team. We didn't care what language you wrote. We cared how you thought. And the more different types of thinking you get, the better our code was. But one thing I always tell people here, have a conversation in the hallway. It's more important than anything else you'll do here. So if there's someone you want to reach out and talk to, or just even mentor in a hallway. Hey, I heard that question you asked in that presentation. I think it was really great. That means so much to someone. And they just don't realize it until you do it.
Such a simple thing to do, right? Yep. Joseph, any advice?
Yes. Well, first off, I would say I liked what Amy started off with, because, as far as women leaders, we need to be allies. And in my career, I know 3 women that were so critical into my development and helped me, or else I would have fell out. I would not have made it in this industry. And they didn't judge me by, how I looked or who I was, or this rough exterior that you see. They actually looked at the inner person and really saw there's something that I can develop here, and really promoted me, championed me, challenged me, so that I could evolve and grow into a leader as well. And then as far as the context of open source, I really am using this as a vehicle. It's very strategic to me now, where there definitely is a bias. A lot of the mentors or students that have come to me, they'll come back to me and they're like, well, I got rejected, and I said, well, what did you get rejected for? And they're like, oh, they said they're going a different direction. And I can't tell you how many times I heard it. I get disheartened because I'm like, well, if you could have just gave them something that they could kind of work towards. So I've been using open source as a way to expose their work. I'm like, as soon as I find out where their interests, I'm like, let's go find a project. Let's get you in there. Let's get that bias out of the way so I can find a way to get you in that door and they can see who you are as a person and why you're valuable. So if you're in these communities and you see people that are trying to just get started, just reach out to them, help remove a lot of the mystery behind it, because this I think is going to really be something that's going to help change, these really dismal low numbers.
I love what Joseph said, because GitHub is the new resume, right? I mean, people are looking at your work instead of just your credentials on a flat CV. And a lot of companies like Facebook, for example, recruit from projects that they open source. They open source the project and they kind of cherry pick the people who are contributing to the project and doing well on the project. And open source gives you an independent public profile that no one can take away from you. Your work is on display versus hidden away inside companies for no one to see. So I love that advice. Check to see if someone's wanting a job at Adobe, look at the projects that Adobe is involved in and start contributing to those projects or start developing interest. Then you can actually demonstrate your work. Yeah. Brian, any takeaways, any advice for the audience before we ask questions from the audience?
I have to borrow from Todd Thibodeau, who is the CEO of CompTIA, I think it is. And one of the things he said, it's very, very simple. Take a look at your LinkedIn profile or your LinkedIn network. And how many people of color, how many women, how many transgender, how many gay people that that's in your network. And that'll give you a pretty good idea of how far you have to go when it comes to inclusion. Something as simple as that, add one or two individuals to your LinkedIn network. I also have to borrow from Van Jones's talk. I saw him about 2 months ago, and I'm a very competitive person, and I like my teams to be number one. Throughout my career, I've always strived to be like that. And one of the things I would ask men in the room is, if you want to be number one, you have a whole nation of half the country or women who are brilliant, who are smart, who can be on your team and who can rise your team to be number one. So if you really care about, and again, as I said, being the best you can be and being number one, you have this whole resource and pool of brilliant individuals that you can choose from to advance your career. I know it's being selfish, but just, it's there, they're there. So take advantage.
Don't restrict your pool to choose from. I love your LinkedIn advice, and someone else I know has similar advice, which is even on Twitter, right? Try to follow a very diverse set of people on Twitter so that you can flood your mind with different perspectives, different viewpoints, different types of people. I can't begin to tell you how many times people will tell me, we'd love to recruit a woman, or we'd love to recruit someone from the underrepresented communities, but we don't know anyone, or no one's applying. If you don't connect with them, if you don't get out and make friends with them or reach out to them, how can you, right? I think OpenStack, I've got to give a lot of credit to you guys. You've done a fantastic job of showcasing a spectrum of people on stage, and that's because you intentionally work at it. It doesn't come by accident, so you've got to work at it. Love the LinkedIn. All of these are really easy to do as we walk out. So we have about 7 minutes left before we dash to the movie premiere or the episode. Any questions from the audience? Or anything you guys do from a global community building perspective that works, please.
Yeah, here we are at a conference that's overwhelmingly maybe 95% male. And we have a majority of women here at the diversity and inclusion panel. How do we convince the cisgendered male leaders, project leaders, employers, code reviewers, things like that, to think about it and become allies? Where do we get data, anecdotes, things like that to share?
That's such a great question. How do we build, how do we reach the mainstream, right? The cisgender male, white male, who are predominantly in this conference. I'd love to get you guys' ideas. I want to get into the mind of one of the attendees to understand what it would take for them to be here, listen to this, and to help us build allies. Most of the people that become allies that I know, and I'll ask the panel also, start with either they had someone, a powerful woman in their life who influenced them, or when they have a daughter themselves, they tend to become allies, but it's too late. You've got to be an ally today, right? And you've got to believe that it's the right thing to do. Can I ask you guys, why did you come, and how can we reach other men in the audience, in the rest of the group? Yeah, of the topic and the need to be an ally? You think, because everyone's sitting in the audience at that time.
Best time to announce it.
Yeah. Do you think doing a discussion like this in the keynote type of forum would be good?
That'd be huge.
Yeah. Right? Because that would reach the mainstream. Would it make sense, I mean, if there is someone that you see as a role model in this community, you know, like, I mean, if the key maintainer of something, or if they speak about this and they talk about their own story as an ally, would that be powerful? So keynote, you know, mention it there, have discussions there. Yes, please. Could you use the mic if that's okay? Because they're recording the session.
Yeah, I know this is.
This is, by the way, Lisa Marie. She runs the largest OpenStack user community in the West.
In the world.
In the world.
China. But so San Francisco Bay Area. Hi, everyone. So we've talked about this, actually, the need for quotas. Because if you really want things to change, you have to figure out a way to require people to do it. I mean, obviously, something like this, where it's a breakout session, there's a lot of competition for people's time, and there's a lot of other sessions that are this empty as well. So, you know, that may be partially explanation, but in general, if we get creative and maybe have a quota for PTELs and say, you have to attend, you know, this many sessions that fall into this category, and you have to bring like these many people with you, or, you know, we can think about what the quota would be for a conference like this that's open source, but that's something we're talking about a lot in corporations, and you're seeing it implemented in places like Uber and Facebook and even Google in some cases. And if you don't have that quota, and people are not incented with money, like in sales, they're incented with their jobs. And that's really, you know, I think just start with the hard lines, and then you can get nicer from there.
To add to what Lisa Marie said, we have a technical track in the company, distinguished engineer fellow, senior fellow, all those kinds of things, right? And so one of the requirements has become open source contributions and things of that nature. But the second requirement has become that they mentor you know, women, underrepresented minorities in the company, that they actually are an ally and, you know, demonstrate ally behavior. There is a Twitter account also called Better Allies, I think, which I follow, and they have very, very good practical discussions of how to be an ally for any community, right? I want to be an ally to the LGBTQ community. I want to be an ally to people of color. I want to be an ally to people with disabilities. But there are ways you can choose to be an ally and how to be an ally. So I love that Twitter account. I will tweet that or forward that if you follow me at Nithya Ruff. I'll show you, you know, how to find that content. But that's a brilliant question. Any other comments on how we can grasp the main stream? Sorry.
Well, one thing that's great about open source is very few people outside my circle know my name is Amy. So if I'm walking down the hall, it's, hey, Spots. So who Spots is, it didn't matter that I was female. It was what I contributed to the community. Now, the hard part is it's sometimes hard to get into the community, and if you don't know one or two people or be someone who will talk to anybody, it can be hard to make that first IRC call. But once you do, no one's going to discriminate against you. You just have to be willing to be part of the community.
I have some mixed feelings on identity, you know, on open source forums, but I hear you.
I would like to just add to what the gentleman over said. It's quite interesting that I've spoken at the diversity and inclusion conference in the past, and the conference went until Thursday afternoon, and the diversity and inclusion breakout session was on Thursday afternoon when everyone's leaving. So I would suggest, if you really want to move the profile of diversity and inclusion higher, have it at Monday morning at 9 o'clock when everyone's there, and then everyone takes it seriously. Everyone takes it seriously. You know that the organization is really focused on diversity and inclusion.
Yep, Brian, spot on.
Yeah, and I was going to say also, I mean, I liked your question. I really appreciate it because it shows you're really a true ally. Like you really are concerned with these things. And one thing that has helped me in this journey, because I still feel like I'm in this beginner stage with it, even though there's been some years, but I just keep taking in more information. Like recently, Caper Center did this really great leaky tech pipeline. It broke down things really well. And a lot of times, what happens is like I'll have opportunities where I'm in front of other D level, C levels, and it gives me talking points. It gives me things to start the dialogue. Because I think it's great. There's been an awareness, but how do we further the conversation? And that's where I feel, for me individually, I have to just keep taking information. Ellen Powell's been writing some really next level blog posts where she's just really have taken it to a point where I'm like, wow, this is really helpful. And then I go back and I'm like having the conversation. So I think you sometimes have to just kind of like seed yourself, and then when those opportunities come up, you can really kind of share some of those ideas. You'll find that opportunities will present themselves, and it's important because especially in some of the open source communities where I've seen sometimes some really wild stuff with like code of conducts and things like that. It's important for us to, I found like the more I'm in tune with this, I'm ready to take action and correct things when I do see things that are not right.
I think we are out of time, but I just want to thank my panelists. I hope you got some really valuable ideas as to why inclusion is important, how to do it, and I think you guys gave us some really good inspiration to do it better next time. So thank you. And please go see Chasing Grace. It's on the second floor in the Lightning Theater. Thank you.